Hello, everybody. Today I'm joined by Eric Pothen. He's a certified eating disorder recovery coach who helps people heal their relationship with food. He's also the host of the Embracing You podcast and a certified integrative wellness and life coach that helps people achieve their goals. So, Eric, it's a pleasure to have you join us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
So, Eric, how has your own experiences helped you connect with others and advocate for normalizing conversing about eating disorders and body image struggles?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think, you know, it was really me sharing my story that really allowed me to begin to connect with others in this space. I feel like for such a long time, I think there was a lot of internalized shame and guilt, I think, with struggling with my eating disorder. And it was really when I decided to take that leap of faith and share my story publicly with other individuals that I think really began to open the door for other individuals to begin to connect with myself and hopefully a ripple effect with others. And so I think it has been such a gift, I think, to create a safer space talking with others around food and the way that their body looks. And once again, after I shared my story, I think I was overwhelmed by the amount of people that also reached out and had shared their own stories of struggling with food and body image. And so I think, uh, once again, it takes vulnerability to really begin to let others know that they're safe in sharing their own stories as well.
So, on that same token, why do you think men are so resistant to being open about this topic?
Yeah, I think when people think of eating disorders and those that struggle with body image, they mostly think of females being the only individuals that struggle. And so I think in a way, you know, from what I've heard from other individuals in the literature that I've reading is that it might demasculinize or really take away that strong gender component. I think, and I think that fear of being perceived as more feminine can be scary for men. And I mean, I put myself into that category of when I shared my own story of really realizing I was part of this marginalized community and I was kind of defying a lot of the stereotypes that are associated, with those that struggle or what society believes to struggle with an eating disorder. And so I really think it is that component of, really questioning and defying those gender norms. And I think it can be fearful for other men to struggle with something that is viewed as something that typically women or females struggle with.
So, do you have any numbers to share around how many men versus women are afflicted with eating disorders and body image issues?
Yeah, so of those that struggle with an eating disorder, about 20 to 25% are male. And so once again, I think this data is skewed in some way because these are men that choose to self-report, when the survey is given. And so there could have been men that have taken the survey and that are internally struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating and or body image and choose not to elect that they are. So to be honest, I would think that that number might be that percentage would be a little higher, um, upwards to maybe 30% would probably be my guess, anywhere from 20 to 30%. Um, and it makes me sad, I think, that uh, men haven't quite felt comfortable enough to begin to uh, self-disclose that. I don't think there should be any shame or guilt for any individual, but more particularly men, in them realizing that it's okay for them to struggle with something such as an eating disorder or body image.
So are eating disorders and body image always coexistent?
I mean, typically, yes. I feel like it's truly the distorted views of our bodies that can fuel or yeah, fuel the eating disorder behaviors. And I actually just started a brilliant audiobook called Sick Enough just this past week, and it's written by an internal medicine doctor, and she in this book describes the fact that, you know, eating people view eating disorders as solely a physical disorder, but actually it's a mental disorder, and it's in the DSM, which is a huge psychological, or it's written by the American Psychiatry or Psychiatry Association. And it's actually a mental illness diagnosis or a mental health diagnosis in the DSM-5. And she really talks about in this book that, um, you can't really separate the mental and physical illnesses, they coexist. And typically, it's the way we experience mental distress with our bodies, which can translate to the way we view our bodies, that can really inhibit us engaging in those eating disorder um, behaviors.
We were talking about this last week. You mentioned that eating disorders are a lot more complex than just a mental health issue.
hmm Yeah, they really are. I think when you develop an eating disorder, you don't just develop it out of nowhere. And also in this book, this doctor describes too how uh, typically at the onset of an eating disorder, some of these behaviors that we engage in are actually coping strategies for some sort of mental distress. It could be related to our body and it could not. And so I think it's very complex, and I think all of these things can be interconnected. And so eating disorders are biopsychosocial diseases, and so part of it, yes, can be genetics. The next part, psychological, right? So there are those components as well, and then there are those social factors as well, which I could talk about for days and days on end about diet culture, and really, the dangers of diet culture and how that can really uh, influence the way that we look and feel about our own bodies as well. And so it makes sense, I think, when I hear a lot of people share their own stories of living with an eating disorder. Um, that it's not just one thing that contributes to the overall onset, and that it's a it's a conglomeration of these things, and it's just like if you're playing the game Jenga and you pull that one piece out and then the tower topples over, and that kind of puts you over the tipping point into truly developing an eating disorder.
So, how damaging do you think mainstream media has been in promoting their ideal body image for individuals? And do you think the recent efforts made, well, I wouldn't want to say recent, but the efforts being made to promote body positivity and inclusion, are those helpful or hurtful?
Yeah, those are really great questions. I think where we're at right now in terms of media and really that evoking and preaching diet culture, I think it's very detrimental to the way that we view our bodies. I mean, the amount of even my own friends, I feel like in the last couple of years that have I feel like gone from one end of the spectrum to the complete opposite, and just kind of following the way that media and society is going with the way that, we are giving attention to bodies and what society is expecting our bodies to look like. Um, I think media has everything to do with it. I mean, on social media, you have those what I eat in a day videos where you have people who aren't even trained dietitians or nutritionists sharing what they eat in a day for the everyday folk to watch, and they interpret that as, well, if I eat exactly like this person, my body's going to look exactly like theirs. And that's just not, that couldn't be any further from the truth at all. All of our bodies process food differently. And so even if you and I were to eat the same diet for 9 months, our bodies would respond differently and our bodies would look differently from one another. And so I think it really comes down to media literacy as well. And I feel like diet culture as a whole has really found weak spots within people. Here are these quick temporary fixes to manipulate the way that your body looks or to lose weight. And I think that damages, because what these you know advertisements and other forms of media tell us is that our bodies aren't good enough the way that they currently are, and that we're always needing to fix and change. And it's those subconscious messages, right? They're not inadvertently saying you need to change the way your body looks, but it's in the way that all of this is presented to you that's saying, wow, you're going to feel so much happier by making you yourself have a smaller body. And so if you think just about, the wellness industry right now, it's booming. I mean, it's a multi-million dollar industry right now. I would even be curious to know, I think it's almost billion at this point. With, I just think how much stuff is getting created in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I think it is very damaging. Social media right now. I mean, I get worried for my own nieces that are all under the age of 10, and my oldest niece is just now starting to, get into social media a little bit. And I just get worried about, the effects that might have on her. And she's so young, and they don't have the media literacy skills. I mean, at the age of 10, and even to adults now that are so easy to just not even like pause and reflect on what is the what are the qualifications of this person that are actually in this video, and are they valid, are they evidence based, and so I think that's bothersome to me. I think from that perspective of just how susceptible people are to soaking in information without questioning the validity of it. um, but the second part of your question of, you know, with regards to more body positivity, body inclusion, I think in the space of, marketing and advertisements, I think that's been really empowering for individuals in that space. I mean, I can only imagine for those models, right, that are, being brought on to, you know, showcase their bodies if they are in a larger body. I mean, how empowering is that for them to have this space,
Mm-hmm.
um, to really celebrate their body, and for their body to feel more welcome and accepted in spaces like that as opposed to other spaces. And so I think, not only can it be empowering for those that are, partaking in the creation of this digital marketing and in the marketing and advertisements, but I think it's even more empowering for those that are consuming it, of finally seeing their body types represented um, all around. And, I think we are doing such a great job in the space of having more body diversity, for women in the space of advertising and marketing. Uh, but I really think there is still a need for more body diversity when it comes to the men, for men. I think we still see a lot of very toned, built men in a lot of marketing, but I would really love for there to be more space for a little bit more body diversity, I think. And yeah, I just think it could have a very similar effect on men uh, that I know it does for women.
Well said. Um, Going back to social media, you were very vocal last month during Pride Month about the added pressures that members of the LGBTQ plus community face. Can you elaborate a little bit on those added pressures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I came out 4 years ago, so when I was 27. Um, and I think after I came out and started to immerse myself more and more within the gay community, I found that there were a lot of different, um, what are the words I want to use? Value systems almost felt a little bit differently and what people found value in themselves where I think the within the gay community what I have seen once again this is just me as an individual what I have noticed so other people might view this differently but I feel like there's a really big emphasis given to the way your body looks how much money you make in a year, what materialistic goods you own, who has the biggest house, who has the nicest car, things like that. That's I feel like people look or that defines their status in society or within the community, if you will. And especially when it comes to the way our bodies look, there's such a hierarchy that has existed for quite some time with regards to if you are built, you have a six pack, you are at the top of the top of the pyramid, and if you aren't that, you're down at the bottom. And so it's what I find really challenging still is that uh, I feel like I've worked really hard to be to separate my own worth from the way that my body looks and I am still working, and I feel like it will always be a work in progress of you know feeling very accepting and or neutral about the way that my body looks and being okay if it doesn't fit this mold or the pressures that or the gay community subconsciously places upon me to have my body look a certain way to fit in. And I think it truly affects, I would say, a majority of gay men. I mean, of those of my own following, I did a poll last year and, I just asked the question, if you identify as a part of the LGBTQ plus community, have you struggled with body image or do you struggle with body image? And 95% said yes.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so once again, that's just based off of my own following and those that filled out that poll that I placed via stories. But I think that is very reflective. Um, of those within the community. I mean, the Trevor Project just released, they do an annual survey with LGBTQ plus youth, and 87% of LGBTQ plus youth experience dissatisfaction with the way their body looks. And so, I mean, talk about the ripple effect of these expectations that we have within our own community and the ripple effect of that. I mean, in the media that these people consume, they're seeing, gay men with just the best body. And so what does that communicate to them, right? That they need their bodies need to look like that as well. And so I think there's a lot of pressure, and I think there's so much work to be done in this space to really uh, neutralize and dismantle this hierarchy that exists. I think in the community, not only with how much money, materialistic goods, but more particularly the way that our bodies look.
I think it's a great thing that you're doing for the people out there struggling, and how you're able to come at this issue from such an authentic place. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
I appreciate
so moving on to your wellness and life coaching, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing this work, especially in the space of life coaching. Um, I think one of the things that I enjoy most about it is that I really walk alongside people on their journey. And so some individuals that I work with are struggling vocationally. And so they might not know what to do for a career or their job. And so essentially what we do is a lot of values. Like, well, what are things that you value in a career and in a job? And then really taking that knowledge of, okay, I think it's really important to have a job that's aligned with your own values as an individual, and begin to brainstorm, okay, what other careers or occupations might be embedded uh, with these other values that you've just identified, and really just helping them take action to meeting whatever goals that they have. So it might be finding a new job. It might be, I'm really struggling with time management. Essentially, I like to consider myself an accountability coach in a way as well. And when I work with clients, the best part about it is they choose their own actions. They choose the direction that they would like to take. I don't say you need to do this. I think you should do this. It's really asking those reflective questions to really empower them to feel intrinsically motivated and aligned with the direction and steps that they would like to take to help them reach the goals that they've set for themselves.
Do you find with your helping of others and their challenges, you've been able to better access and process your own inner thoughts and emotions?
Yeah, I think it's really surprising. I think it is so true. I think when we enter into the space of helping others, that sometimes we can see our own story reflected in others. And as we hear other individuals talk and share with us. And so I think it is really eye opening for me. I think when I have those conversations, I'm like, holy buckets, like that is me to a T. And then to ask a follow up question to them of like, well, why have I never asked myself that own question? And so I just think when we enter into the space, not only can it be more didactic, where I might be teaching them new skills or knowledge, but I really think these relationships are reciprocable, where they might learn from me and I learn from them in the process. And I think going into all relationships that I develop in that space with that mindset um, really makes all the difference. And I think it also allows for um, shared power too, which I think is so necessary in that space. Um, because I think if we don't create a safe space where other people feel comfortable enough to share their own voice and opinions, then we're not doing our job right. And so I think it's really, how do you create that environment where individuals feel empowered and confident in their voice, and for them to realize that they are not um, flawed by coming to us with, needing help in X, Y, or Z.
So, your podcast, you've been producing that for over, I guess, just over 2 years now. Can you tell us a little bit about it, what it covers, and why you decided to create it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my podcast is called Embracing You. And you're right, I just hit 2 years, 2 years a couple weeks ago. And so it has been such a gift to have that space. And so my podcast really it covers a wide array of topics, from mental health to eating disorders and body image, and just really overall well-being. And so, I think a catalyst for me wanting to create this podcast as well was, just based upon my own sharing of my story via social media, and recognizing how powerful it was for me to have a space to share my story, and just what happened internally, where I think after I shared my story, a large portion of that shame and guilt that I was carrying with me was released, of like, wow, this feels like 10,000 pounds lifted off of my shoulders just by being able to share my story with others. And so I also, in the creation of this podcast, and it's still very integral into the space that I create when I create episodes, as well as I want other people to to have intentional time and space to share their own story of living with an eating disorder or struggling with body image with others, and to just see the amount of pride that they have once their episode is created and shared with others, to see them share it via social media, for them to after our interviews say something as simple as, "Oh my gosh, that was really powerful." And so I think there is nothing that makes me happier than creating those spaces for other individuals. And I hope that, in them sharing, it has a very similar effect on them of just reduce shame and guilt that they may have experienced of carrying, their story and history of living with an eating disorder or body image or mental health. Um, because it was such a pivotal moment, I think, for me in my own healing journey. And I think it's what catapulted me into my true healing journey with living with my eating disorder. And so, yeah, it's that podcast has been such a beautiful platform, I think, not only for me to reflect and share a little bit of my own journey, with those that choose to listen, as well as uplifting other individuals' stories, and really hoping to create a ripple effect of others feeling moved to enter into this space, and to really begin to normalize having conversations about struggles with eating disorders and body image, which I think is truly at the root of a lot of the work that I do via social media and with this podcast. I think we've done such a beautiful job of opening up the door to have more conversations about mental health, and I think, yes, of course, there's still work to do in that space with destigmatizing, struggling with that. But I think eating disorders and body image, more in particular, that is still a very taboo, stigmatized things to be struggling with. And so I just really want to normalize conversation, and to just really eliminate that stigma.
We were chatting about this last week, actually. Your podcast from June 10th is Movement Really Medicine with your friend Marcus Kane. That one really resonated with me as a larger athlete. Um, it made me aware of my obsessive relationship with training, and I've always struggled with what I see in the mirror. So that made me very aware that it's something I need to work on. It's also a great listen, and I just want to thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, once again, these episodes, I think, I want people to know that these are just my own thoughts and the way that I view, movement in the space of eating disorder recovery. And so I think what I want people to hear is that here are my thoughts. It's okay for you to agree with them and to absorb them, and make them personal to you. And also, there's space for you to disagree or to see things differently. And I think that's the beauty of sharing something as personal, as what are your thoughts on eating or exercise and eating disorder recovery. I mean, everyone in this space, I think, has different thoughts about the way that they view movement and exercise and eating disorder recovery. And, I think it's okay for people's relationship with it to be different than mine. Um, but yeah, I think that episode has been on my mind, that topic and concept. And I think sometimes when people are entering into the space of eating disorder recovery, it really takes that moment of pausing and reflecting, of really being able to identify and redefine, how do I want to look at the way that I view exercise now? And what are my main motivations to engaging in exercise? And it's wrong of me to say you can't only view exercise as a way to manipulate the way that your body looks, right? Like that's just part of movement. And I think it's hard to separate that, right? Where I think for me, it's like I feel good when I move my body, but I have to pause and reflect of like, okay, why is it that I'm feeling good when I move my body? Is it truly like for that reason? Or somewhere deep down is that eating disorder voice trying to sneak back into the picture and say, oh, you need to move your body so you feel good. And it's a lot of self-reflection, and it's a practice. It's something that I feel like I'm always working on as an individual is, whose voice is speaking to me when I'm feeling like I need to engage in movement. Is it my own voice or is it the eating disorder voice? And I think learning how to identify whose voice is whose is one of the most integral skills an individual can learn, once they enter into the space of recovery. And if you aren't able to identify that, I think it's hard to consider yourself in recovery, because you don't have that interoceptive ability to identify what are these triggers and what are the sources of them. Why am I feeling a certain way? Is the eating disorder voice? Is it me? Is it societal? And it's so multifaceted. And once again, it's something that I feel like I will always be working on. You don't just live with an eating disorder or and you just fully get rid of it. I think those thoughts might lie more dormant at times than others, but I think they'll always be there beneath the surface. And when they arise, I think it's really how you choose to respond to that moment that determines whether or not you're in recovery, or you might still be struggling with an eating disorder.
So after almost 40 episodes, speaking to all of your guests over the years, what has the podcast taught you?
That's a beautiful question, and I need a second to think about that because I want to be intentional with my response. I think there are a couple of things that come to my mind here. Um, I think at the end of the day, one of the biggest things my podcast has taught me is that every individual just wants to feel loved, and to feel accepted. Um, I feel like they just want to be happy with themselves. And just, I think all of us as human beings are so interconnected in that space of, I mean, wanting to feel loved is such a basic human need. And really needing that space to feel loved, to feel seen, to feel heard. And so I think just the importance and the power of listening, and just the effect that it can have on individuals. And so I think it's taught me, that we all just want to be loved. Um, I think another thing that this podcast has really taught me is we are all more similar than different, I think, when we share our stories. And I think time and time again, from what I hear when people hop on and share their own stories of living with an eating disorder, there are so many commonalities that exist in this space, where I think we can really uh, tap into those commonalities and join together as a much larger community to create a larger impact, I think, in the way that we, view eating disorders and body image in the way that we talk about them. And so I think it's important to embrace the individuality and the uniqueness of everyone's story. And also, I think sometimes people can feel so scared and isolated that no one's going to understand what I'm going through. But when you get two people that have struggled with something, such as an eating disorder, chances are you'll find a lot more commonalities in your story with another person than differences. And so I think this podcast has taught me that too, where it's been empowering for me in a way of hearing other people share their story and feel say, yes, I get that. Like my experience was not exactly 100% yours, but it is similar and I can empathize with what you also went through. And so I think I would say that's another really big thing that this podcast has taught me as well is that we are all more similar and connected than we are different from one another.
Would you say you're, or better yet, how much closer are you to self love and well being than you were at the beginning of this journey?
I think today in the here and now, this is the most that I feel like I have loved myself, the most I have loved my body, the most I have appreciated my body. Um, and I think it would be facetious of me to say that I am in this space every single day, and that I'm just on top of the world with, the way I view myself and the way that I view my body. But I think for me, in this journey of really sharing my story, creating spaces for others to share, being more of an advocate for those that do struggle, has really just shifted my own narrative that I use with myself, right? I feel like being an advocate means almost you got to practice what you preach, right? And so I think in me becoming a much more grounded and stronger advocate in this space, it's really required me to begin to practice more and more of what I am asking others to do myself. And I think in me sharing a lot of my inspiration of what I share with others are things that come to my own mind of things that I'm practicing and telling myself in the moment. And so, a couple of months ago, I got into this, little series on my page of, healing my relationship with fitness. And I feel like once again, it's really that self-reflection component of entering into that space of movement. But prior to, I would be in the gym hours and hours on end, and there used to be such rigidity, I think, in my training schedule. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, I don't need to be in the gym on hours and hours on end in order to feel like I've had an effective workout, right? Like me just moving my body is enough, no matter the duration. And so once again, like there's that, but then deeper down, it's redefining, or this hierarchy that exists of okay, I need to be like sweating gallons and gallons of sweat um, to have an effective workout. But I can go for a walk and I can still consider that a workout. And there is no moral judgment of me choosing to engage in that with movement as opposed to maybe something a little bit more rigorous, high intensity. Um, and so, yeah, I think this is the closest I have been um, to, I think, really getting to that strong, solid place of um, self love. And it's ongoing. I think it's silly to say too, you're always going to be in this space, but you're going to have those moments that you take a couple steps back. But really, it's that innate resiliency I think that we all need to recognize and remind ourselves of, and tap back into when we find ourselves in that space.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Um, let's talk about your Embracewear company. What was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so I started Embraceware. Oh, geez, I think this will be coming up on 3 years this fall, so we're probably a little over 2.5 years. Um, but once again, I think I wanted to try and find a way to broaden and make my messaging more widespread in a very subtle way. And so I thought, why not create an apparel company that raises awareness around eating disorders. And I'd gotten this idea actually. I was on a flight out to New York, and just as I was about to land, it was kind of like a light bulb moment, and it just came out of nowhere, really. You should start a clothing company. And so, I got home from the trip and I just felt very inspired to make this happen. And that's just the type of person I've learned myself to be is like, once I have an idea that I'm excited about, like, I'm going to make it happen. And so I did a brain dump of like, okay, why do I want this apparel company to exist? What do I want to be at the core of, the messaging about this, about the apparel, about, you know, what I want people to have conversations about. And so I just did a brain dump of a lot of those. and just some of the messaging that I'd done in my advocacy work prior to launching this. And a word that popped up uh, on this piece of paper was embracing yourself, which also was a catalyst or a big inspiration for the name of my podcast, which is Embracing You. Because I think at the root of all of this work, with regards to owning the way that your body looks, is really learning how to embrace who you are as an individual, and really eliminating worth from the way that our body looks and finding that innate worth that we have within. And so that's how I got the name Embraceware of I want people to learn how to embrace themselves as an individual, and learn to really begin to love themselves for those qualities. And so, I thought, how can I create a design that, reflects this? And so my logo, has two hands that are kind of going like this in a way. When I think of embrace, I just think of like giving myself a hug and just telling myself that I'm okay. Um, and for me, these two hands is also kind of serves a visual reminder to embrace. And so I started the apparel company. I created the logo, the design, and I really do think that the apparel, when it's worn, sparks conversation, and it's very subtle. Like, what does embrace wear? And I want people to be able to, define it on their own in a way too of, yes, it raises awareness around eating disorders and body image, but also here how it has really shifted the way that I view myself, and then it has really allowed me to love myself for who I am too.
Now you are hosting the Minneapolis NEDA Walk. That's the National Eating Disorder Association. Sunday, October 27th this year.
Yep.
Can you tell us about the event?
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Eating Disorders Association hosts awareness walks throughout the country. And last year, I was actually going to participate in the one that Minneapolis had scheduled, but it was actually canceled. And so I was very, very saddened by this. And this year I was looking for the event again, and it was nowhere to be found, and it wasn't ever rescheduled. And there just wasn't a date on the calendar for this upcoming year. And I just felt very passionate about, I want to make this walk happen. And I really, because these walks, I think, can really create that community, that sense of community with those that have struggled, and with family members, especially, of those who have also struggled, and just building that safe space and building that support system and that support network for all individuals. And so we'll be coming together as a state at the end of October, and there will be speakers that will be sharing their story of living with an eating disorder and their road to recovery. There will be local eating disorder treatment providers there with tables, and it's really just a space for us all to come together in community, to raise awareness and to once again be entering into that space of having more conversations, open conversations about it.
How can people sign up for it or find out more information?
Yeah, so if you even just Google Minneapolis NEDA Walk 2024, it'll bring you right to that webpage. But I also have that linked in my link tree attached to my Instagram account, which is at epothen, which is Epothen. And so I have my own team called Embracing You, very fitting. And then if other individuals that are listening, have a family member that has struggled with an eating disorder and wants to create their own team and fundraise, um, they can do that via the main Minneapolis Walk page as well. But it is open to all ages, very family friendly. and a large or the money that is raised will go directly to the National Eating Disorders Association to help with their programming that they do nationwide to help others.
Excellent. So, Eric, what do you hope people take away from today's chat?
Yeah, I think one thing that I really hope people take away from today's chats is that, you know, they aren't alone. I think sometimes when we enter into this space of talking about things that carry a large amount of weight upon our shoulders, um, it can feel really isolating. And so I just want other people to hear that uh, I will always be a safe space. If you are struggling with one of these things, my DMs are always open for you to reach out. I am always more than willing to lend a listening ear if you are feeling so inspired to begin to share your story, um, with others. I think another thing that I want people to hear is that um, they are worthy of their own love, which I think can be really, really hard. And I think sometimes people view that as a selfish act of choosing to love themselves and to choose themselves first, maybe necessarily as opposed to other individuals. But I really think I want people to hear that they are worthy enough of loving themselves because they are a whole beautiful individual who has so many beautiful innate qualities that make them and that are worth being celebrated. And so I want people to hear that as well.
Well, thank you, Eric. I really want to thank you for sharing your time and your story and for being such a staunch and authentic advocate for eating disorders and body positivity, well being. It's really inspiring how you've been able to turn your own struggle into a strength that you can share with and help others facing their own similar challenges. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to you as well. I think you are creating a really beautiful platform to really uplift stories like mine, to really let other people know that they aren't alone in whatever it is that they are struggling with. And that as this is called, they're more than their story, right? Like they are so much more than their struggles. They are so much more than all of these things that they've endured in their lives. And I just really want to thank and uplift your work as well, because I feel like you are the one that are creating these spaces for others to come and enter into, to begin to feel less alone on whatever walk of life that they're in.
Thank you. Means a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Eric, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Daniel.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
Bye.